Hey guys, welcome to Chapter 7 Notes. It's a Prezi, so we might bounce around a little bit. We'll make the best of it. Dealing with consumerism. In consumerism, the idea of buying stuff. We'll get to that in a minute. Um, why don't you ponder for a minute what your favorite TV commercial is and what makes it your favorite? Right? Often TV commercials, they have something that makes us actually enjoy them. We're not going to skip past them on the PVR every time. Um, Companies spend millions of dollars every single year advertising the products, try and make you watch them and not skip past them. And with that, it's the part of them manipulating you guys. But that's okay. It's a good manipulation because it lets us buy stuff. So, on that same note, I want to talk briefly about propaganda. It's a form of communication aimed towards convincing you to do something, right? It only presents one side of an argument, so it convinces you to do something. Governments use it a lot of times, but companies use it. If you look at advertising, companies use propaganda to convince you that their product is best. No matter what that product is, that's what they're trying to do. Some classic examples of propaganda here. World War II ones. I'll talk about that in a second. So I want you for the U.S. Army. This one kind of caught me off guard. I thought it was a World War II one when I first included it. It's actually one for Star Wars, which I can zoom in a second. Classic Rosie the Riveter, right? We can do it. Down underneath, it's some public shaming of if you were a true man, you would join the Navy, and uses this girl to convince guys to do it. Again, maybe some certain amount of sex appeal or something like that. Now the Star Wars one, this is one I thought originally was one for the military, but if you look, it's got Star Wars things in the back there, and it's talking about fake Star Wars figurines or people selling them illegally or whatever, and saying that this is a play on an old one, that if you basically don't do the right thing, you're helping Hitler out, which is a great take on life in general. Someone took the time to create ones for the Hunger Games, some potential propaganda ones. This one would be from the Capitol, right? Convincing people to take the Tesserae and feed themselves, thus entering the Hunger Games more often. Someone else, again, spent way too much of their time creating propaganda posters for Star Wars, using the idea of getting behind Darth Vader or the sex appeal of Princess Leia there. This is kind of reminiscent of the World War II pinup girls type things. And the Darth Vader one, right? He can't do it alone, so you got to help him out. Kind of some classic examples. So that's propaganda. So consumerism, it says, what role should it play in our economy? Well, we know that as consumers, we have to buy stuff. And in the times we're going on nowadays, we're seeing some pretty big economic issues because people aren't going out and buying things. So what role should consumerism play in our economy? That's the ultimate kind of focus question that we have to look at for this chapter. And we have to make a decision based on what we actually truly feel is important. So what is consumerism? All right, we've talked about these kind of topics before, but Buddhism, the belief in Buddha and his teachings and ideas. Catholicism, Catholic Church. Baconism is the idea of all things bacon. I don't know if that's a real thing. Consumerism must be the belief in consumers. Not really. Consumerism is the idea that the more consumers buy, the stronger our economy is going to be, right? Consumers dictate what people want. And so therefore, if a bunch of people want something, a company is going to produce it, right? That's the idea behind consumerism. And the more consumers have options, the better those products are going to be. So what does it all mean? There's three parts to this. First part of consumerism is the more you buy, the more stuff you're going to have. Like, that's a no duh, right? We call those things material possessions. A material possession is something that you can kind of hold in your hands or have with you. That's, compare that to what you call an experiential purchase, right? You go and you watch a movie. When the movie's done, you don't own that movie. It's just in your head now, right? Material possession, a pair of running shoes or something like that. So the more material possessions you have, the more you own. The more material possessions you have, the more likely you'll have a better quality of life, right? Quality of life, how happy you are, the more stuff you have. Often it doesn't make you happy, but you're fulfilling your wants and needs, right? So people, especially in our more developed countries like Canada, United States, those types of things, purchase goods and consume materials in excess of our basic needs. We definitely buy more stuff than we need, but that kind of is that lovely consumer roller coaster that we're on that was discussed in that movie, The Story of Stuff, that you should have watched by now. What it all means, part two. So the more material possessions you have, the more you've spent as a consumer, right? Stuff doesn't come for free. So consumer spending plays an important role in a mixed or a market economy because consumers have to spend stuff. By them spending things, we keep businesses running, which is, again, during the pandemic here, something that we're noticing. A lot of businesses are starting to struggle because people aren't spending the money. And then economic growth is affected by consumer behavior. Clearly, again, 2020, the perfect example of how economic growth is impacted by consumers' behavior or lack of behavior, right? The example at the bottom, profit a country's economy makes from the goods and services produced, and how many people have jobs, use that income to buy goods and services, right? The more people are spending, the more goods and services are produced, the more jobs are created, etc. And then part three to this is if you don't spend money, companies' profits fall. Companies don't make money. If the profits fall or fewer people have jobs, indicates an economy is shrinking rather than growing, right? So our economy during the pandemic is shrinking quite fast, actually. It's a little bit worrisome. And fewer people have jobs, fewer people are spending, businesses suffer, they fire more people don't have jobs, and it kind of cycles into that. And so economic policies are created that emphasize, with an emphasis on consumption, right? Using stuff. It's, trade. The government will come up with a policy that encourages trade between provinces or countries. Competition, make it easier for companies to compete against each other. Tax breaks, so new companies don't have to start as much, pay as much taxes, whatever, in order to encourage consumer spending and keep economies growing, right? So the whole idea is the more consumers spend, the better our economy functions in a market or a mixed economy. So again, long story short, more consumers spend, better it is for the economy, right? Is there a downside to all of this? I'm hoping right now you're saying, yeah, there's a huge downside to this, but let's take a quick look at the downside to consumerism or rampant consumerism, when consumerism goes unchecked. And that's called anti-consumerism. Many people consider consumerism to be quite a negative aspect of our societies. People are spending way too much and buying too much junk and everything else. People often have a tendency to identify strongly with products or services they consume, especially those with commercial brand names. If we're sitting in a class right now at this point, I'd have you take a look around the classroom and see how many people are wearing logos of whatever type it is, right? In late 2019, 2020, Champion was the big thing. That logo was, rampant everywhere. Who knows what it's going to be in 2021 or beyond, but those logos are there, right? And the fun aside is that you guys are advertising for those companies, convincing more people to buy them. And people identify strongly with that logo for whatever reason. So a materialist is someone that believes in the idea of materialism, is collecting material goods is an important priority. The more stuff you have, the more important you are, is their mentality. Companies and corporations have realized that the wealthier people are, the more they tend to spend, obviously. But if you can get rich consumers to buy something, right? So the most attractive targets for marketing, that trickles down and becomes the standard to which all other consumers try to follow. They see a celebrity or Connor McDavid driving around in that type of vehicle. Everybody's like, oh, that's the vehicle I want, right? This is why there's so many TV shows that show the lifestyles of there actually used to be a TV show called The Lifestyle of the Rich and Famous. And it's basically advertising. This is how these people live, right? And so everybody else tries to follow how the wealthy do it. There's multiple reasons for that. One of it is the idea that if the wealthy use it, it must be a good product, right? They're only going to buy the best, so that must be the best. It's not always the case, but that's one of the reasons. So critics of this idea of consumerism are quick to point out that in our societies that are consumerist, like Canada, we're more prone to damage the environment, to contribute to climate change, use up resources at a higher rate than other societies. Canada uses more than our fair share, right? We could throw up a graph and shows, consumption of the United States and Canada, population versus the rest of the world. We use up way more than our fair share, that's a consumerist society. A couple of quick little kind of cartoons there, or memes, I guess we want to call it, or meme in a cartoon. Let's call it that. Materialism, spending money you don't have on the crap that you don't need, right? This gives us a Black Friday at Target here. Guy's got like 1, 2, 3, 4, maybe 5 TVs crammed into his car. Why does he have that, right? It's ridiculous, but that's the idea behind it. And then this one is an anti-consumer cartoon, right? The classic Nike, just do it. And this guy's here like, just do without it. The idea that, maybe we don't need all that stuff. Okay. So that's anti-consumerism. We could spend weeks on that. So let's talk about your consumer habits for a bit. This was in a previous assignment. When you watch the story of stuff, kind of talked about this. What influences you as a consumer? Are you informed? And how important is it to where the product was made? What's the impact of consumer behavior on the environment? Most of the stuff we do not think about on a regular basis. We really truly don't. So influences you as a consumer. Some rather important parts there, but we'll kind of get to that in a moment. In your textbook, there's 5 factors listed, and then there's some marketing techniques. But while we're talking about these, what factor do you think has the biggest impact on your role as a consumer, and then why? So the first here's the 5 factors: identity, health and safety, jobs, the environment, and marketing. Okay, identity, who you are, what you believe in, where you live, the groups you belong to, or your way of seeing the world come into play. Well, teenagers buy stuff differently than 40-year-olds or 50-year-olds. Males and females have different priorities, et cetera. And so that identity, which group you belong to, right? Whether it's, you're part of the jocks or whatever else, you're going to have a different mindset than potentially other people. Health and safety, you're buying a product. Is this going to be healthy for you? Is it going to impact your health, your safety, security? Most teenagers, this one, forget about it. Jobs, I'm guessing most people don't sit there and go, if I buy this sneaker, it's going to help some kid in Thailand. No, it's just because it's fashionable. The environment, most of us hopefully are a little bit environmentally conscious, but this is definitely not number one. And then marketing. Do advertisements and other techniques affect what we buy? Yeah, probably. Okay, so identity, real quick, right? The idea is the choices we make as consumers reflect our identity. Brand names, family and friends, personal preference, price, quality, environmental factors. These all come into a pretty big play when we're buying stuff. Yeah, we're going to skip that slide. Health and safety. Again, do we sit there, right? Like why it says, why do the following products have warnings, bans, or legislation to discourage consumers, right? Alcohol, we have a limit on what age you can be to buy it. Cigarettes, tobacco, etc. Firearms. Obviously, these are in place to make our society healthier, potentially safer. Sometimes that has a negative impact on our consumerism as well. That I'm not allowed to have it, so I'm going to go out and buy it, right? Junk food, the fact that we don't have the pop machines in our schools, that tends to have an impact on your guys' purchasing habits as well. Debate over banning junk foods. Yeah, we're going to move on. Basically, it's saying that governments have an impact on what we buy, right? And the idea of mandatory seatbelt laws or mandatory seatbelts in vehicles or airbags, et cetera. These are, food labeling. All this stuff impacts us as consumers. Jobs, again, most of us don't think about what jobs we're helping out when we buy stuff. Talks about different sectors of the economy in terms of industry, primary, secondary, and this fancy word is tertiary. It means like third or further down the road. There is something called quaternary as well. Primary it'd be like fishing or mining, agriculture. You're extracting the things out of the earth or from the planet. Secondary, you're manufacturing it into something. Tertiary, you're providing a service or selling stuff. And then quaternary would be research, often maybe something like government too. We're going to skip the pen part here. And then the last ones that we're going to talk about, there's the environment in there, but then marketing. Okay, and so I'm actually going to hit the old pause button here, and we'll look at marketing in a part 2 of this these notes, just to break it down so you're not listening to me forever, or at least you can get up and grab a snack in between. All right, so we'll talk about marketing in part 2.